So do you know anyone who has actually married their cousin?
So many, even in my families. But myself, I don't like it.
Cousin marriage. A practice most Britons never think about, but one causing significant problems within parts of the country's Pakistani community.
Muslim culture must be married with cousins.
Linked to birth defects, clannism, cousin marriage is fueling a fierce debate over whether Britain should finally ban it.
This will be for people that are married under UK law, whereas most Muslim women and men, they get married under their own, Islamic law.
And nowhere is the issue more visible than in Bradford. While 40 to 60% of British Pakistanis marry their cousins, in parts of Bradford's Pakistani community, the rate is over 90%. By contrast, fewer than 0.05% of white locals in Bradford marry their cousins. I asked locals what they thought about the issue. So do you know anyone who has actually married their cousin?
So many, even in my families.
Really? Here in Bradford or in Sudan?
Yeah, even here in Bradford.
They don't mind it? Why do they do that? Because to some people it seems a bit bizarre.
Like I said to you before, is type of the culture. Because your family, big family, making arranged marriage, some of them, because this is related to the culture anyway. But myself, I don't like it. Yeah.
And do you think they're not worried about, the genetic problems and the issues like that?
Because this is lack of education. Because educated people, they're thinking about that and making awareness and going for the test or something like that.
And do you think in Bradford here, you see people who have these genetic problems because of the cousin marriage? Do you ever see people that you're like, wow, maybe there's a genetic issue here?
I'm not seeing in Bradford, but there are some in background home. Yeah, I have seen that in my life. I have got experience, but I'm not seeing in Bradford anyway.
There's some data that suggests that Bradford has very high rates of cousins marrying each other. What do you make of that? Do you think that should be banned?
Cousins marrying each other? Yeah, that's totally against, in our religion, because I'm a Muslim. We're totally against that. Any cousins or families marrying each other, mate, go sick, mate.
Apparently the data suggests maybe 90% of people, or some people in Bradford, are marrying their first cousins. Why do you think it's so high?
Probably because they're all inbred. Or something, I don't know, innit? They probably love each other that much. They're getting in bed with each other and that, and then just doing whatever, innit?
There's some people who think it should...
All foreigners though what are doing it. It's not really UK people.
Do you know anyone who's done it?
No.
There's some people who want the practice banned. Do you think it should be banned?
It's not for me to comment. Not banned, because it'd be wrong for me to say that.
Do you know anyone who's married their cousin here?
Personally, no, I don't. But my friends, they do quite know. Quite a few people.
Really?
Yeah. It's actually quite common within minorities.
Why is it so common here?
Personally, I'm not really sure, but I'm pretty sure it's got to do with certain agreements between families and friends. For example, if a person takes someone's daughter to be married, it could be for religious reasons, or it could be for marital rights towards certain lands and different things.
Some people think that cousin marriage should be banned. Do you agree with that?
Well, it really depends on their point of view, doesn't it? You can't really say much about it unless you actually know what's going on.
Some people think that cousin marriage should be banned because it causes genetic problems, sort of medical issues.
Well, when it comes to things like that, obviously, to me, the furthest away from your family is the best, But it's tradition in it. In some religions, in some cultures, it's tradition, and I do believe that, a few hundred years ago, I think it was happening in England as well, people like the royal family, they used to marry their cousins and things like that. So it's I think it's a cultural thing. Yeah.
So you don't think it should be banned?
To me, it's like each to their own, innit? I won't marry my cousin, so it's one of them, innit?
There's some data that suggests that a lot of people meet through their cousins here in Bradford. What do you make of that, the kind of cousin marriage issue?
So, no, they don't marry. Mostly, my Muslim people, there's some family, they arrange marriage. If the kids, first they ask the kids if they like it. Then lots of people are married in here and in English or forever.
So you don't think, because some people think that cousin marriages should be banned. Do you think it should be banned?
No, banned. My Islam culture is, who said to the banned?
There's a member of parliament who thinks it should be banned because it causes genetic problems.
No, I'm against him because my Muslim culture must be married with cousins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a Muslim culture, so it's okay basically.
And Islam is allowed if you're married with the uncle's daughter, you have children.
Yeah. In Bradford, amongst the Pakistani community, there's a lot of cousin marriages, according to the data. What do you make of that?
I mean, what can I say? It's tradition. I'm not going to say anything about it because, I'm not racist. I'm not racist. So, I give respect to them. What can I say? It's tradition. I mean, sometimes I think it's in every tradition. What can I say? Depends.
Yeah, I'm not going to bulge into the business. If it's their thing, then it's their thing.
There's a member of parliament who wants to ban cousin marriage because he says it can lead to genetic problems when you have children, sort of medical issues. Do you think it should be banned?
I mean, it's not his problem, you get me? It's not like it's his kids, it's not his kids, so I don't know why is he... I mean, because if he's on about genetic mutations, he's on about, they're going to be ugly kids, you get me? So he's just basically face shaming them. That's just racist, in my opinion. I think it's just racist.
I think it's also about the actual medical problems like diseases, and it's difficult for people. It's not just about the facial features and so on.
I mean, we have hospitals, good hospitals,
In Westminster, Conservative MP Richard Holden has gone so far as to propose a nationwide ban.
First cousin marriages should be banned on the basis of health risk alone.
This is a highly sensitive issue, and in discussing it, we should try to step into the shoes of those who perhaps are not from the same culture as ours, to better understand why the practice continues to be so widespread. The reason the practice is so common is that ordinary people see family intermarriage overall as something that is very positive, something that helps build family bonds and helps put families on a more secure financial foothold.
Here to talk about cousin marriage, obviously you introduced this legislation to ban cousin marriage in Britain.
Yeah.
Why did you do that?
I did it for three reasons, really. The first of all is I think it's really a social reason. I think that if communities are just purely marrying within themselves, then actually you're not getting that integration that you need in wider society. And if you look back, it's one of the reasons England actually became one of the first nation states, is because the Angles and the Celts and the Saxons and the Picts and everybody else all started to intermarry beyond their own extended tribe. And that actually started to form the nation state. And what's important about that? Well, it's actually, you can't just rely on the blood relatives to sort out your squabbles for you. You've got to rely on something more than that, something which binds you together, an independent legal system, freedom of speech, all of those things that we associate having emerged from Britain in the early Middle Ages and then actually slowly spread out to, around the world. All of that is based on the idea of actually people having to basically do deals beyond their blood kin. And that's why actually this is so important. And that's the first reason. I suppose the second reason really comes down to, actually freedom. And, it's about freedom for individuals within these communities to marry who they're in love with, rather than who they're told that they have to marry for the good of the family. And we saw that when I raised this in Parliament, the speech against it, against my 10 rule bill was all about, well, should be about keeping wealth and protections and things within families. The third is just around the health impacts of this. First cousins, for centuries, first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, fourth cousin marriage was banned in the UK. And then it wasn't. And actually, the implications of that if anybody knows anything about European history, see the Habsburgs, go down to see what happened to the Spanish Habsburgs. You know, that you can see real issues.
When you talk about freedom, I'm sure some people would argue that within these Pakistani communities in Britain, they want to be free to continue their own traditions, their own culture and things like that. And they would say that you should give us the freedom to marry who we want, and if that's our first cousin, then so be it.
Well, let's take that to a logical extreme on one side. First of all, you could say, well, let's just remove any laws around who you could marry. You could marry your uncle, your aunt, your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister. Obviously, nobody's really arguing for that. So we all accept there's going to be some form of limitations. And my view beyond that is, well, I think that it's just too close if you're sharing the same set of grandparents, right? Because who can get divorced? Right, or can say no to that when they're sharing the same set of grandparents. I think that's too close. I think it's too close for people. I think that's why for centuries we actually had laws in place to do that. I think it's just too close. And I think when you come to that, you come down to the cultural relativism argument that all cultures are equal. And as I said, when you get down to it, when people have the freedom of choice, total freedom of choice in normal society, fewer than 1 in 200 get married to their first cousins. Within some of these communities, you're seeing over 80%. There's also an issue in the Irish traveller community as well, where it's over 20%. We shouldn't be having this. People are being forced into these.
How can you enforce a ban in practice?
A very good question. And there's two things actually we're seeking to do in legislation. We actually did table an amendment into another piece of legislation, similar to how do we stop in practice? How do we stop incest within family relationships at the moment? Well, it's illegal, and when people know there's a line there which you don't cross, then it's backed up by the law, and that's exactly what we want to do with this as well. We just want to extend that definition of essentially of who you can't marry. And who you can't have sexual relationships with, that little bit further. I think it's a really sensible step in the right direction to do that, because I think because of all of those issues around health, but also around freedom, also in integration I've mentioned. Yes, it is a balance. You're absolutely right. This is a balancing act to strike. But I think with this issue being now so prevalent in some of these communities, it really is, I think that has shifted the nature of the debate. So we have to actually legislate in this place.
But broadcaster Fahima Mahmood argues that banning cousin marriage would be wrong, insisting education and awareness are the better path forward.
Well, regardless if I approve or not, and I know that it happens in many communities that people think it's only amongst the Muslim and Pakistani sort of community, but cousin marriage is not new to Britain. Our own monarchy was built on it. Queen Victoria married her cousin Prince Albert, and even our late Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip were related as cousins. So if it was acceptable at the very top of society for centuries, why suddenly criminalize it now? Yes, there are health considerations, but the increased risk is modest, similar to the risk of older mothers having children, which we manage through healthcare, not bans. The solution is education, and I feel that genetic counselling and support, not heavy-handed legislation. And more importantly, banning cousin marriages strips away personal freedom and unfairly targeting certain communities, and it drives away people from legal protections, pushing marriages underground and creating a stigma rather than solutions. I also think that there are other lifelong conditions caused, which is much more exposure for all communities that we need to focus on. If this is a health issue, which is causing the NHS so much money, which is actually an environmental one, which is a direct effect of alcohol, which is FASD, fetal alcohol syndrome disorder. Why are we only picking on one? I don't even know how you're going to define cousins. Nowadays it's so complicated with relationships. And is it first cousin, second cousin? How far down are we going to go? A lot of people don't even realize whether they are related or not. It is something which is so extreme. And I think the admin to actually pin this down, if it's going to go into some sort of legislation, is going to be absolutely chaos. And I think even people that are now still practicing cousin marriages within the Pakistani community that we see quite a lot of statistics still exist, they are diminishing over time. But at the same time, this will be for people that are married under UK law, whereas most Muslim women and men, they get married under their own, Islamic law.
Obviously, there are genetic problems. If you marry your first cousin and have children, you're much higher likely to have that child to have genetic problems than if you marry someone who's a distant relation or not a relation at all. But anyway, just on the principle of whether it's okay to marry your first cousin, do you think morally it's acceptable to marry your first cousin? Do you think that's a kind of normal, acceptable thing to do?
I think if it's consenting adults and they choose to, it's fine. I would stop personally at incest. I personally wouldn't want to marry my first cousin. We don't do that in our family. We come from a different background, culture, and Muslims are very vast, obviously, across the globe, and they have different ways of practicing. I know in the UK, majority of Muslims are Pakistani, so that's how people sort of relate to the fact that thinking that that's everyone's practice, but it's not. I think, again, if it's consenting, and I think the problem here that we need to address is more about maybe forced marriages, which is already illegal.
Meanwhile, conservative Muslim activist Hassan Imam says the practice not only damages health outcomes, but feeds into wider cultural problems, from clannism to grooming gangs.
From my perspective, this should not be a controversial issue, especially amongst the Muslim community, because there is Islamic precedent, to move away from marrying relatives, okay? And that was mentioned by Prophet Muhammad, where he said, marry non-relatives so that your children are not weak. Now, those sayings of the Prophet are seen as weak, okay, and that's why it's not taken seriously. But if we look at Muslim scholars that came later in the 12th century, like Ibn Qadamah, he actually made the link between intelligence and marrying relatives, right? And those who are watching, and especially if there are Muslims who are watching, this is probably news to them because they don't know this. I didn't know this until I did some research on this. Because he said this will have an effect on intelligence. Now, about 900 years later, so what he hypothesized and what Prophet Muhammad said in the 6th century and what Ibn Qadamah said in the 12th century was shown to be true 900 years later, when there are many, many studies now, genetic studies, to look at, that show negative consequences. So there's one study, an Israeli study that was conducted by an Israeli Muslim, Hassan Abu Saad. He looked at 221 children of Bedouin Arabs in the Negev desert in southern Israel. And what he found was that of those who were products of cousin marriages, 70% had IDD. That's intellectual and development disabilities. 70% of those of cousin marriages. There were moderate IDD and 20% had severe. And of course, you have the Bradford study as well. So although I mentioned 60% from Pakistan, in Bradford, this stats for cousin marriages was actually higher, I think into the 90%.
Why do you think it impacts Pakistanis from who live in Bradford or live in other areas of Britain, particularly from rural Pakistan in particular, and not, say, Bangladeshis or other Muslim communities?
Yeah, I think it's related to the tribal system that has come about. It's known as the Biraderi. It's because they want to protect the tribe. And this sort of indirectly links, I think, to the issues that have been with grooming gangs. And very unfortunate that a lot of English girls were victims of that. But the way the gangs operated have been through a sort of a tribal system as well, and a cousin marriage features or sort of fuels a part of that system.
Because you have a community that's very tight-knit, that is, as you say, kind of tribal, clannish, where perhaps external figures, including English girls, are seen as outsiders and in a way fair game compared to the internal family or clan community. Is that basically what the argument you're making?
Possibly they might be, the English girls might be seen as fair game, but they shouldn't do. That's the whole point. Because if they did these things back in their home countries, they'd face capital punishment, because raping is not allowed. Right, under Muslim law, it's not allowed. There's serious consequences.
Cousin marriage in Britain is not a fringe issue. It's shaping the health and the future of whole communities. In Bradford alone, over half of Pakistani children are born to related parents, and genetic disorders linked to cousin marriage account for up to half of South Asian infant deaths in the city. The rates dwarf anything seen in the wider British population. Debates over cousin marriage have long been taboo, But with migration from countries where the practice is common rising sharply, the question is no longer whether we talk about it, but whether we ban it.